she died. I know this because of a wrist sticking out from beneath the cloth that covered her body, on a cart pushed by 2 city guards, moving through the morning traffic of Langervin, before I could do anything but watch it go. She had promised me she would leave tonight. She didn't leave fast enough. I know who killed her, and I know she died because she told me the truth. But first, I want to tell you about the night before. Nobody slept. I want to be precise about this, not as complaint, simply as fact. The night had produced too much. The archive's contents, the shape the Hollow's operation had assembled into. Sable asleep on the borrowed bedroll, while the 3 of us sat with what we now knew. None of it was the kind of weight the mind set down easily enough to permit sleep. Faelwyn was at the window when the morning arrived. She had been there since we returned from the underground. Whether she had moved in the intervening hours, I could not say with certainty. She simply was present, the way she was always present. The specific quality of someone for whom wakefulness and rest were not the binary they were for everyone else. Lyra was against the wall beside the door, her shoulder pouch in her lap, eyes open, ears tracking the building's sounds with the automatic attention of someone whose body never fully relinquished the job of reading the environment, even when the mind was doing something else. Sable, on the bedroll, was the only one who had slept. Deeply, completely. The sleep of someone who had been given permission to stop holding everything and had accepted it without reservation. I was sitting on the edge of my own bedroll, with the journal open in my lap, and the question on the page, and nothing written beneath it yet. The morning came in through the narrow window, gray first, then pale, then something that decided it was going to be light after all. Lyra stood. She put on her cloak, checked the moonclaw gauntlet in the shoulder pouch, with the brief automatic touch of someone confirming something that was always there. Then she looked at me. She said, quietly, so as not to disturb Sable, that she was going to find food. I told her I would come. She looked at me for a moment, with the warm brown eyes that never performed what they did not mean. She said, "Stay. I know where to go." She left. She returned 20 minutes later, with a cloth-wrapped package and 2 ceramic cups, balanced with the focused precision of someone who had decided managing the cups carefully was more useful than explaining where she had been. She put the package on the floor in the center of the room, unwrapped it. Roast meat, sliced thick, wrapped in flatbread, still warm. And from her jacket pocket, a small sealed bottle. She set it beside the food. Faelwyn looked at the bottle. Something that was almost warmth arrived alongside the precision in her voice. "Herbal tea," she said. Lyra, already sitting back down, and said the stall owner recommended it. We ate. Sable woke to the smell of it. She sat up with the immediate completeness. That was, I had learned, simply how she transitioned from sleep to presence. She looked at the food, then at Lyra. She said nothing. Lyra handed her the larger portion, without comment. Sable ate with the focused attention of someone whose body had been waiting for this specific permission. Not desperately, not dramatically, but with the complete absence of restraint that 3 weeks of careful management produced when management was no longer necessary. She ate more than the rest of us combined. Nobody commented on this. Faelwyn drank the tea with both hands around the cup. Faelwyn, who brought deliberate care to everything, drank tea at dawn in a small anonymous room with the same quality of attention she brought to the things that mattered. I watched her for a moment. I had noticed this before, without naming it. The way she moved through spaces, the way she sat, the way she held things. Nothing careless, nothing unconsidered. The kind of precision that doesn't come from discipline alone, but from discipline that started early enough that it stopped being discipline and became simply how the body moved through the world. Someone had taught her this, or she had taught herself. Either way, a long time ago. I ate without particularly tasting. This was simply what happened when my mind was fully occupied elsewhere. The room was quiet for a while after the food was done. The specific quiet of 4 people who had said what needed saying and were now simply present with the weight of it. The harbor bell rang once. The city outside beginning its morning operation, sector by sector, the way Langervin always began, commerce before anything else. After a while, Sable spoke. She said, carefully, in the tone of someone offering something they have decided is worth the cost, that there were 2 locations she had not included in what she told us last night. Archive locations, along the Eastern Lake Road. She had kept her own records, separate from the Hollows. The kind of redundancy that someone who understood organizations understood was worth maintaining. She would give them to us. Not because she had decided we were trustworthy, because she had decided the Hollow was the more significant problem, and the calculation resolved in our direction. She was precise about the distinction. Faelwyn asked 2 questions. Sable answered both. Something in Faelwyn's posture shifted fractionally. The specific adjustment of someone whose model has just become more complete. Lyra's ears turned slightly forward during the exchange. They did not fully return to their ambient position afterward. I wrote the locations in the journal. Below the question I had not yet answered. 2 specific points on the Eastern Lake Road, small enough to fit in 3 lines of charcoal notation. I looked at them for a moment. Then I looked at the question above them, still unanswered. Sable had fallen asleep against the wall, sometime during the exchange. The deep unconsciousness of someone whose body had made the decision before her mind could argue. Her breathing was even. Her head dropped slightly to one side. The room was the 3 of us now. Lyra finished the last of her tea, set the cup down beside her. She was looking at Faelwyn, at the window. I got up, told them I was going to use the basin at the end of the corridor. The corridor was short. The door behind me did not close fully. The water was out. I stood at the basin for a moment, the specific minor frustration of a practical need unresolved, and turned to go back. I was almost at the door when I heard Lyra's voice. Not the ambient tone she used for things said to the room generally. Something quieter, more deliberate. The tone of someone who has been deciding when to say something and has decided the time is now, before the day takes over, before the moment closes. She said, "I heard what you were talking about last night. You and Liam. Good thing you didn't kill him. I stood in the corridor. From inside the room, silence. The specific quality of silence that followed something received rather than deflected. No denial, no explanation, no words at all, just received. I stood there a moment longer. Then I turned and went to find another bathroom. When I came back, Sable was still asleep. Lyra was organizing her shoulder pouch. She did not look up. Faelwyn was at the window. I looked at her. She did not turn immediately. When she did, her expression was what it always was. Composed, precise. The silver eyes carrying more than their surface area allowed. Neither of us spoke. I sat down. I opened the journal to the question, why am I here? I looked at it for a long time. I did not write the answer yet. But for the first time since I wrote the question, the answer felt close enough to touch. Lyra left for the guild mid-morning. She said that she was filing the scaleback claim before the floor filled, that she would be back before midday. She was. I did not hear her come in. I was reading the wall of the anonymous room. Automatic, unavoidable. The load-bearing elements of a space I had been inhabiting for days, and was about to leave when I noticed the Rons on the floor. In front of Faelwyn's pack. In front of mine. 12. Lyra was already at the window, organizing something in her shoulder pouch. She did not look up. I looked at the Rons. I looked at her. She said, without looking up, that the buyer had asked the questions she expected, that she had answered them the way we discussed, that he had found the story interesting. She said he had mentioned it to someone before she left. I understood what that meant. I picked up the Rons, put them in the inside right pocket of the jacket, where the registration card had been sitting, and was now no longer sitting. The pocket that had been holding something institutional was now holding something that belonged to me. The weight was different, but it was there. Faelwyn collected hers without comment. The carriage was also Lyra's idea, and Lyra's execution. She went out again in the early afternoon and returned 40 minutes later with the specific quality of someone who had resolved a logistical problem and found it adequate. She said she had arranged a rental from the Sable district near the guild quarter. A covered two-person bench with a rear cargo platform, horse included. Driver's position open for whoever chose to take it. Departure at first light. She said the horse was adequate. The way she said it suggested the assessment had been thorough. I thought about arriving in Glyth with nothing. About what it meant to be leaving Langervan in a carriage. The specific quality of that. Not running, not fleeing. Choosing a direction and moving toward it, with sufficient resources to do so properly. I let it settle. Then I picked up the journal and opened it again to the question, why am I here? I looked at it, closed it. Not yet, but closer. The afternoon moved into evening. Faelwyn went out sometime, after the harbor bell rang for the 4th time. Her final communication. She left without explanation, and returned with the quality of someone who had done what they went to do and had nothing further to add. She resumed her position. The room held us, all four of us, Sable included, present and awake in the specific way of people who have processed what they needed to process and are now simply waiting for the morning to make the next decision possible. I sat with the journal open in my lap. The question, the two archive locations beneath it, the night outside, beginning its operation. After a long time, I stood. I put the journal in the inside left pocket of the jacket. Lyra's eyes came up immediately. I told her I needed air. She reached for her cloak. I told her, "Just me." She stopped. Her hand stayed on the cloak for a moment. Then she looked at me, the full attention, both ears forward, the assessment running. This was not something I had said to her before. In all the weeks since White Mountain, I had not once said, "Just me." She knew this. I could see that she knew this. Sable was watching from her side of the room. She said nothing. The expression of someone who understood exactly what was happening and had decided it was not her place to involve herself in it. Faelwyn turned from the window. She did not say anything. She simply looked at me, the silver eyes carrying whatever they always carried, and then looked away. Back to the window. Back to the city outside. It was not dismissal. It was something closer to permission. After a moment, Lyra set the cloak down. "Come back before it gets late," she said. I said I would, and I went out. The city at night had a different frequency than the city in the day. Not quieter. Langervin did not do quiet, but lower, reduced to its necessary operations. The harbor moving, the waterfront district running its nighttime commerce, the specific acoustic quality of a trade city that had decided sleep was for places with fewer boats to unload. I walked through it without particular direction. This was not entirely true. I had a direction. I simply had not decided it consciously. My feet had resolved the question before my mind caught up. 3 streets from the anonymous room, the bar I had passed twice since we arrived in Langervin without going into. Stone walls, low ceiling, lamps that gave enough light to see your drink and not enough to see the other people clearly. The kind of place that had been absorbing the weight of its patrons' evenings for long enough that it had developed a specific gravity of its own. I sat at the bar. I ordered something. The barman pointed at 3 options. I chose the middle one. It arrived in a cup that had opinions about its previous use. I did not particularly care. I drank slowly. Not to become anything other than what I was, just to give my hands something to do while the rest of me worked through the arithmetic of tomorrow. The journal was in my jacket pocket. The question still unanswered. I was thinking about the archive, about the planning document the Hollow had compiled from 60 years of sealed material, about the specific category of records they had been studying, not what the war Outworlder had done, but what could be done now by someone with equivalent capabilities. I was thinking about Faelwyn at the window, about the specific quality of her stillness in the archive when she placed 2 fingers against the sealed container and held them there, when she said it had never been inert. The specific weight of someone who recognized something from a long way away and was containing what that recognition produced. I was thinking about Elethera Forest, about my hands on a wound with no tools and no magic, and nothing except the structural logic of pressure and load, and where the failure was concentrating. About 7 days on a low stone outside a healer's door. About what it meant that she was still here, that she had stayed, that she had been staying since before I understood what her staying meant. I sat with this for a while. Then the woman sat down beside me. She was perhaps 25, perhaps older. She carried herself with the specific economy of someone who had been working in places that required discretion for long enough that the economy had become habit. Dark hair, put up, a few strands loose at the neck. The dress was dark, fitted, long-sleeved, the kind of thing chosen with awareness of how it would be seen, rather than for any practical purpose. She ordered a drink, looked at me with the sideways attention of someone who had already assessed the situation and was now executing a decision already made. She was good at it. The conversation that followed was warm and without obvious agenda, and completely constructed. I recognized the construction the way I recognized a building designed to look older than it was. The technique was correct. The aging was applied rather than accumulated, and it was visible only if you understood the language. I engaged politely, not because I was interested, because engaging was more useful than not engaging, for understanding what this was. She reached for her drink. I saw it then, her left wrist, the inside face of it, just below the heel of the hand. The sleeve had shifted when she reached forward. 3 lines, short, parallel, angled slightly, not horizontal, not quite vertical, not decorative, not personal. Institutional. I filed it. She continued talking. I continued listening, with the portion of my attention that was not still reading the mark. Then she said, with the specific warmth of someone arriving at the point they had been building toward, that she had a room upstairs, that she found his company interesting, that the evening did not have to end at the bar. I looked at her. I told her, directly, without performance, that I appreciated the conversation, and I was going to finish my drink alone. Something shifted in her expression. Not hurt, recalculation. Then she stood. Her voice rose just enough for the whole bar to hear. 5 men were already on their feet, looking in our direction. I had registered them when I arrived, 5 people present together, while performing the appearance of being present separately. She said, loud enough for all of them, that I had touched her. I had not touched her. The 5 men were already moving. I want to be precise about what happened next. I am not a fighter. I have never been trained to fight. What I have is the ability to read load-bearing structures. In buildings, in terrain, in living bodies. And the specific understanding of where force concentrates and where systems fail when precisely disrupted. I have been beside Lyra and Faelwyn through multiple engagements, reading their combat the way I read everything, structurally. Not to learn technique, to understand the logic underneath it. I did not have Lyra's speed. I did not have Faelwyn's precision. I had not been trained by anyone. I had the logic, and 5 men who had been arranged to perform a task in a specific sequence and had never encountered someone who read the sequence before they executed it. The first one grabbed my upper arm. He gripped hard, the grip of someone who expected resistance to pull away from. I stepped into it instead. His hand was in the wrong position for the direction I moved. I found the pressure point at the junction of his forearm and inner elbow, the specific nerve cluster that under direct pressure at the correct angle produced immediate and complete loss of grip function, followed by numbness from elbow to fingertips. His hand opened. He could not close it. The second came from my left. I had read his dominant side from the way he stood, weight on the left foot, pivot direction to the right. When he moved, I went right, outside his dominant arc. One precise application of force to the peroneal nerve, just below the outer knee. His leg received a signal it could not process. He went down. The third was the largest. He came from the front, with the specific intention of a man who expected his size to resolve the situation. I did not try to stop him physically. I read his weight distribution, the forward lean of someone who intended to grab rather than strike, and moved to the angle where the grab could not complete. He overextended. I found the ulnar nerve at his inner elbow and applied direct pressure. His arm went electric from elbow to little finger. The grip that was already closing failed completely. The fourth came from behind. I did not read this one in time. The impact caught me across the upper back, hard, an elbow or a forearm. The specific force of someone who knew how to hit rather than just swing. I went forward into the bar. The corner of it caught my eyebrow on the way. I caught the edge with both hands, turned. He was winding up for the second strike. I did not wait for it. A precise strike to the solar plexus. The celiac plexus beneath it produces immediate diaphragm spasm. The body interprets this as the cessation of breathing. Approximately 30 seconds of complete physical incapacitation, regardless of size or fitness. He sat down on the floor of the bar. He was breathing. He did not know he was breathing. He would be fine in 30 seconds. The fifth had been watching all of it. He looked at 4 men on the floor in various states of confusion. He looked at me standing at the bar, with a cut above my right eyebrow, my hands at my sides, my weight distributed in the way it had been distributed since I started traveling with people who understood how to stand. He was the one who had hesitated longest when the woman gave the signal. The one whose face I filed as someone who thought before he moved. He was thinking now. He decided he had somewhere else to be. He left. I noted his face, filed it, in the place where I put things that were not yet problems, but were moving in that direction. The woman was gone. She had left during the engagement, which told me the engagement had been designed to create exactly that window. Not a punishment, a distraction. Whatever she had needed to do in the 30 seconds while 5 men occupied my attention, she had done it and left. I sat back down at the bar. The barman looked at the men on the floor, then at me. Then he put another cup in front of me, without being asked, and found somewhere else to look. I sat with the cup for a moment. I was not thinking about the 5 men. I was thinking about the mark on her wrist. 3 lines, parallel, angled. I opened the journal to a clean page, drew the mark exactly as I had seen it. 3 lines, parallel, slightly angled, the inside of a left wrist. Below it, I wrote one question. Whose mark is this? Then I looked at the other question, still unanswered, on its own page. Why am I here? 2 questions, 1 night. Neither answered yet. I finished my drink, and I went back. Lyra and Faelwyn were both awake when I returned. This did not surprise me. Neither of them had been sleeping when I left, and neither of them were people whose bodies made that kind of decision without consultation. Lyra had her hand near the shoulder pouch before I finished opening the door. She read the situation in approximately 3 seconds. The set of my posture, the way I was carrying my back, the cut above my right eyebrow. With the flat precision of someone identifying a problem before assessing it, Lyra said that I had been in a fight. I told her it had found me, rather than the other way around. Faelwyn was at the window. She looked at me with the silver-eyed attention that filed everything. Then at the cut. Then at the way I was standing. She said she wanted to know exactly what happened. I told them. The bar, the woman, the setup, the 5 men, the mark on the inside of her wrist. I described it precisely. 3 lines, parallel, slightly angled. The fact that the woman had left during the engagement, rather than staying to escalate. When I finished, there was a specific silence. Lyra broke it first. She said the setup was too clean for a random shakedown. The 5 men positioned in advance. The woman's exit timed to the engagement. Someone had planned this before the evening began. She paused. She looked at Faelwyn. Faelwyn had already produced a small notebook. She was writing the description of the mark, with the precise shorthand of someone encoding information for later reference. She said, without looking up, that she thought we should find the woman. I asked why. She said, "The mark is not from Langerven. I have seen a variation of it before." She looked up from the notebook. She said, "A woman with that mark, in a bar, approaching a specific person with a manufactured setup. That is not opportunistic crime. That is intelligence work." She said they were going to find her tonight. Finding her took Faelwyn 40 minutes. I did not ask how. She returned to the anonymous room and gave us a room number, at an inn 2 streets east. And then we went. Lyra knocked. A long silence. Then the sound of someone who had been sitting very still for a long time, deciding whether responding was the correct decision. The door opened. She was still dressed, her pack against the wall, partially organized, not finished, not abandoned. The specific state of someone who had been sitting with a decision and had not yet made it. She looked at the 3 of us in the doorway and ran the assessment. I could read it happening behind her eyes, the rapid calculation of someone for whom risk assessment had become as automatic as breathing. Then she looked at me. Something shifted in her expression. Not relief, not fear. Recognition. She let us in. Her name was Maren. She did not offer it immediately. She sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the 3 of us with the composed patience of someone who had already decided to talk and was simply organizing the order. Then she looked at me and said she had known who I was when she sat down beside me at the bar. I waited. She said she had seen me before, not in Langerven, in Aurenfall. The bathhouse. I had used it after the storage halls, The long days of structural work, the practical necessity of existing in a working city without calling attention to myself. The bathhouse had staff. I had not paid particular attention to the staff. I had not paid particular attention to her. She had paid attention to me. She said, a black outer garment unlike anything from any region she could identify, a newly purchased brown tunic, white shoes that did not belong anywhere she had seen. She filed it with the person she reported to. She paused. She did not know at the time what the description would be used for. She looked at me directly. She knew now. The room was very quiet. Lyra's tale had stilled completely. Faelwyn was looking at Maren with the silver-eyed attention of someone reading a structure rather than a person, looking for the load-bearing elements, the stress points, where the weight was actually going. Maren continued. She said she had been working for the organization for 4 years, placed in Aurenfall 8 months before I arrived. Her role was observation, the bathhouses, the inns, the places where unusual people passed through, and could be catalogued without the formality of official channels. She had filed hundreds of descriptions. Most of them were nothing. Some were flagged for follow-up. Mine had been flagged immediately. She said she had followed us to Langerven, not as assignment. She had not been told to follow. She had followed because she had been watching the organization's operations in Langerven from a distance, and something had shifted when we arrived. The underground, the archive, the team that went in and did not come back. She said the setup in the bar, the 5 men, the manufactured grievance, was not her plan. It was the organization's contingency. If she made unauthorized contact with me, her handlers would move. The 5 men were watching the bar. When she approached me, they activated the setup to either pull her back or create enough chaos to prevent whatever she was trying to do. She had not known this at the time. She had worked it out afterward. Then she said, and this was the part that cost her the most to say, there is a woman in the organization. She cannot give us a name. Someone who has been managing the file on Outworlders in Glyph for longer than she had been employed. She authorized the collection board against me before I left Aurenfall. She understood what I was before the board was filed. She knows about the Observer. Faelwyn went very still. Not the stillness of assessment, something that arrived from a different direction entirely and was being very carefully managed. Maren looked at her directly. She said, the organization knows that Faelwyn El-Rahil is in Langerven. They know what she is. They know that an Elven Council observer, traveling with an Outworlder whose assessment has moved toward facilitation, is a different category of problem than a free variable. She said it with the flat precision of someone stating a tactical fact, rather than issuing a warning. Faelwyn is now a specific target, not because of anything she has done in Langerven, because of what she represents. A protected Outworlder is significantly more dangerous to the organization's plans than an unprotected one. The room held this. I looked at Faelwyn. She was looking at Maren, with an expression I had not seen before. Not the calculation I knew, not the assessment. Something that arrived from a different direction entirely. and was being very carefully contained. I looked at Maren. I asked her quietly, because the question deserved precision, why she was telling us this. She was still for a moment. Then she said she had filed a description in Aurenfall, and she could not unfiled it. She had been watching what the organization did to people it considered loose ends. She had already become a loose end, whether she talked to us or not. The 5 men in the bar were not a contingency. They were the plan. She was the plan. Her role was to get me out of the bar, willing or not, into the street, into whatever was waiting outside. She said she had known this when she sat down beside me. She had done it before, many times. Different cities, different targets, different handlers who gave her the same instructions in different words. She was placed, positioned, pointed at people, and she moved in the direction she was pointed. This was simply what her 4 years had been. But I had declined, politely, without calculating what the declining would cost me, without agenda, without the specific awareness of someone who understood they were being approached for a reason. She had sat with that for a moment longer than the job required. In 4 years of working for people who calculated how to use everything they encountered, she had not once seen someone who did not calculate how to use her. That seemed worth something. The room was quiet for a long moment. Then I asked, "Do you have enough money to leave?" She said yes. I told her, not as a suggestion, as a structural fact. Leave tonight. Not in the morning, tonight, before the city goes fully quiet, while the gates are still open and the traffic is still moving, and one more person leaving is simply one more person leaving. She looked at me for a moment. Something moved across her face. The specific expression of someone who has been making calculations for so long that receiving a simple recommendation without agenda attached to it requires adjustment. She said she would. Lyra looked at her. She said directly, briefly, with the genuine quality of someone who found this true and saw no reason to imply otherwise, that she hoped the next city was kinder than this one. Maren looked at her. Something at the corner of her mouth moved. Not quite a smile. The ghost of the person she had been before 4 years of filing descriptions in cities that were not her own. She said, "Most of them are." We left her there. We came back to the anonymous room. 4 people in a small space at a late hour, with the specific weight of a conversation that had cost someone everything, and had given us something we had not possessed before walking through Maren's door. Sable was asleep on the bedroll, deeply. The complete unconsciousness of someone who had spent 3 weeks managing every variable and had finally been given permission to stop. I looked at her for a moment. Then I looked at the room. The journal on the floor beside my bedroll. The charcoal stick beside it. The packs, organized, ready. The departure planned, and the carriage arranged, and everything that needed to be done before first light, already done. Faelwyn went to the window. Lyra sat against the wall beside the door, her shoulder pouch in her lap, not sleeping, present in the specific way she was present when she was processing something, at a frequency below conversation. I sat on the edge of my bedroll. After a while, I opened the journal. I turned to the page with the mark I had drawn. 3 lines, parallel, slightly angled. The inside of a left wrist. Below it, whose mark is this? I crossed the question out, not aggressively, one clean line through it. I knew whose mark it was now. The question had been answered at a cost I had not set and could not change. I did not write the answer beneath it. I turned to a clean page. I held the charcoal stick for a moment. Then I drew Corin's hands. Small, holding bread the way you held something when you were not sure it would come again. The specific quality of a child's hands, doing something careful, uneven knots on a rough cord. I looked at the sketch for a long time. Then I thought about what Maren had said. Not the part about Faelwyn, not the part about the organization. The part at the beginning, the description she had filed in Aurenfall. A black outer garment unlike anything from any region she could identify. White shoes that did not belong anywhere she had seen. She had filed this before I had done anything. Before the archive. Before the scaleback. Before the fault wall and the knocking. And the 3 weeks of everything that had assembled itself into what we now knew. Just the clothes. I sat with this for a while. Then I made a decision that had been available to me since the first city I walked through in this world, and that I had simply not made yet. In the next city, I would change them. Not because what I was wearing meant nothing. It meant something, the jacket especially. But Lyra was in this with me. Faelwyn was in this with me. And the clothes were something I could actually do something about. I closed the journal without writing it down. Some decisions did not need to be recorded. They simply needed to be made. I sat with it closed for a while. Then I opened it again. And the other question arrived. Not because I summoned it, because the night had finally produced the specific conditions that made not asking it impossible. A woman had told me the truth at significant cost. The organization that wanted me neutralized had been tracking me since the first city I spent real time in. The observer beside me had been carrying knowledge she had not given me yet, and would give me eventually. And I did not know what it was, but I knew it existed. All of it produced the same question from a different direction. Can I go back? Not, do I want to? That was a different question. I knew that answer already. Can I? I had read everything in the Langervan library that was worth reading about Outworlders. The records documented arrivals, skills, partial fates. They did not document returns. Not one. Not a rumor carefully notated as unverified. Not a fragment suggesting the possibility had been considered. Either no Outworlder had ever returned to Earth from Glyph, or the ones who returned left no record here. I sat with the second possibility for a while. Then I set it aside, not because it was impossible, because it required a mechanism I had no evidence for, a crack that could be opened from this side, a threshold that could be crossed deliberately rather than accidentally. A death survived twice in the same direction. The honest answer was, I did not know. The honest answer beneath that was, I had not looked very hard. And the honest answer beneath that was something I wrote down and looked at for a long time. I think about Noah sometimes. Not with love, not with hatred, with the specific incompleteness of a story that ended in the middle of a sentence. He is alive on Earth. Chloe is alive on Earth. They went on. They made whatever choices people make when they have done what they have done, and the person they did it to has simply disappeared. I will never know what those choices were. That specific not knowing surfaces sometimes. Not the impossibility of return, not the grief of a world lost. The particular incompleteness of a story I was inside, and then was not. I wrote the question in the journal. Can I go back? I looked at it. Then I wrote the answer beneath it. I don't know, but I am not looking. The two moons moved across the strip of sky, visible through the narrow window. Arden, broad and pale. Aaliyah, smaller, pink amber, doing what it always did, without requiring acknowledgement for it. Faelwyn was still at the window. She had been there since we returned. Whether she had moved in the intervening hours, I could not say. She was simply present, the way she was always present. After a long time, she turned from the window. She moved to the wall beside it and sat, slowly, the movement of someone whose body had finally made the decision for her. She looked at the room, at Lyra, at Sable, at me. Then she closed her eyes. Not sleep exactly, just the night doing what it could with what was left of her. Even when rest came, Faelwyn was still deliberate. I sat with the journal closed and the bracelet on my wrist, and the two questions answered. One crossed out, one given the only honest answer available, and watched the moons move across the strip of sky. The city outside continued, indifferent, continuous, doing what it had always done. Morning arrived, without asking whether anyone was ready for it. Dawn came in through the narrow window, in the way dawn came into rooms that faced walls. Not directly, reflected, the light having decided on its direction before it arrived. Sable was awake before any of us acknowledged the morning. She was sitting up on the bedroll, with her pack already organized beside her. Not hurriedly. She had been preparing for this moment since before she opened her eyes. Everything she owned returned to its correct position, the pack smaller than ours. Everything fitting into what she could carry, and no more. She looked at the three of us. Then she stood. She said that she was going to go. Nobody argued with this. It was not an argument kind of statement. Faelwyn went to her first. I watched from across the room. I could not hear what was said. Faelwyn spoke first. 2 sentences, perhaps 3, in the low, measured tone she used when she was delivering something precise. Then she reached inside her cloak and produced something small, something that fit in a closed hand. She placed it in Sable's hand. Sable looked at it. I read her face across the distance, the micro-adjustment of someone receiving something they had not expected and are recalibrating to account for. Not surprise, recognition. Someone who understood what they had been given, and understood also that understanding it fully would take longer than this moment allowed. 4 sentences between them. Faelwyn stepped back. I filed what I had read, without knowing the content. Something given, something received, something that would matter later, in a way neither of them had stated. Then Lyra. She went to Sable directly. She said something I watched rather than heard. One sentence, maybe two. Sable's professional composure slipped. Not dramatically, a fraction. Someone encountering sincerity they had not accounted for, finding that their model of the interaction had just been revised. She recovered quickly, her recovery fast, trained. The recovery of someone who spent years in situations where composure was professional currency. But for one moment, it was visible. She said something brief in return. Lyra nodded once, the complete satisfaction of someone who has said a true thing and does not require it to be acknowledged further. She stepped back. Then Sable came to me. She stopped at the distance of someone who understood that proximity was a variable to be managed. The professional distance, not unfriendly, simply calibrated. She said she had something to tell me. She told me carefully, not because she was uncertain, because she was choosing the precise words that conveyed exactly what she intended, and nothing beyond it. She said that the Hollow's interest in the displacement phenomenon is not incidental to their archive research. It is the same operation. The displacement and the archive network are connected at a level she did not understand when she accepted the engagement. They have been tracking the displacement for longer than they have been accessing the archives. Years longer, possibly a decade. She said she did not know what was causing it. She was not given that information. But she knew. The Hollow knew. She looked at me directly. They are not afraid of what is approaching from the east and north. She said she thought they considered it an asset. I stood with this for a moment. Then I asked, carefully, because the answer would complete something, whether she thought the Hollow considered the displacement a threat. She said, no. She thought they were anticipating it. I thanked her. She received this with the brief nod of someone for whom gratitude was information rather than warmth. Filed, noted, moved on from. She picked up her pack, adjusted the strap with the practiced motion of someone who had done this 10,000 times. She looked at me one more time. The expression on her face was one I had been building a model of since the archive. Someone who had decided something and was not going to say what they decided. Not hostile, not warm, just settled, internal, complete. Then she turned and walked out of the anonymous room. I went to the doorway. I watched her move through the corridor, down the stairs, into the street below, visible briefly through the narrow window before the city absorbed her. Not until she turned a corner, until she was genuinely gone. Indistinguishable from every other person moving through the morning with their own direction and their own business. I read her departure the way I read everything. What I read was someone still calculating. Someone who had left carrying more than the 2 archive locations she had written on the folded paper she gave Faelwyn. Someone who had left carrying something she had not yet decided what to do with. I filed this, in the place where I put things that were not yet problems, but were moving in that direction. Then I turned back to the room. Lyra was already at the door. It was time to go. I asked Lyra, "Where are we going?" She did not answer immediately. She looked back at Faelwyn, a brief look, the checking of someone who knows which information belongs to which person. Faelwyn said, "East, the Lake Road, 4 days to the first location." Lyra looked at me. She said east. That was the whole conversation. The carriage was waiting in the street below. Lyra on the driver's bench. She had climbed up before either of us had finished coming through the door. The horse looked at her. She looked at the horse. Some brief assessment occurred. She clicked her tongue once, and the horse settled. Faelwyn and I took the covered bench. The city was in full morning operation around us. Commerce and noise, and the particular vitality of Langervan, doing what Langervan always did. Moving things, absorbing things, indifferent to whatever was happening inside any specific anonymous room on any specific morning. From the driver's bench above, Lyra, humming. Something half-formed, fragmentary. The absent melody that meant she was managing something and had not finished managing it, but was moving forward anyway. I registered it, filed it in the place where I put things that were warm rather than useful. Faelwyn was beside me, reading the city through the carriage window, with the silver-eyed attention she brought to environments she was about to leave. Cataloging, filing, thorough in the way she was always thorough, understanding that you read a place most clearly in the moment of departing it. I was reading too. The buildings, the load-bearing elements, the specific confidence of stone that had been carrying weight for long enough to have developed opinions about it. I had been reading Langervan since we arrived. This was the last reading. I saw a cart moving in the same direction as us, toward the gate. Not horse-drawn, pushed by one city guard and escorted by another. The cloth covering the cart was plain, dark, tied at the corners with practiced efficiency. Bodies went out of cities, not into them. I registered this before I registered anything else about it. The direction, the guards, their movement, not urgent, not casual. The pace of a task that needed to be done before the morning traffic peaked. Then the cloth shifted at the edge, just at the corner, just enough. A wrist sticking out from beneath it, the hand slightly open, the relaxed quality of something that had stopped requiring anything from the body it belonged to. The inside of the wrist, 3 lines, short, parallel, slightly angled. I stopped breathing. Not as a decision. My body made it before my mind caught up. The involuntary arrest of someone whose system has just received something it was not prepared to receive, despite having known, on some level, that it was coming. I had told her to leave tonight. She had said she would. The cart continued at its unhurried municipal pace. The guard pushing it adjusted his grip on the handle without looking up. The escorting guard walked beside it, with the practiced indifference of someone performing a function they had performed many times. They did not know her name. I watched the cart until it passed through the gate. I thought about the bar, about the 5 men, about the one who hesitated, who decided he had somewhere else to be, who had been in that bar the same night she tried to warn me, who had been part of the same operation that activated the Hollow's contingency against her. He had been part of what produced the cart. I did not say this out loud. I did not say anything for a moment. There was a specific duration, brief, internal, between seeing the wrist and being able to make the words available. Not long. Long enough. Then I told Lyra and Faelwyn, in the tone I used when I was delivering a structural conclusion, what I had seen, what the mark meant, who the wrist belonged to. Neither of them asked who. They already knew. Lyra's humming stopped. The silence where it had been was louder than anything that followed. Faelwyn looked in the direction the cart had gone. For a long moment, she was completely still, integrating something that confirms a conclusion they had been hoping was wrong. Then she looked forward. She said, "We are leaving the city now." Lyra clicked to the horse. The carriage moved faster. The main gate was in full morning operation. The guard approached with the professional attention of someone looking for problems, and not yet finding one. Papers, Lyra's guild registration, Faelwyn's documentation, my registration card. He looked at the card. He looked at me through the carriage window. He wrote something in his ledger. Then he held out his hand. I looked at the card for a moment. The stamp of the city's seal. The date of registration. Builder. Structural work. Origin listed as South. The administrative artifact of a specific decision, made on a specific morning, when I had needed 3 days of buffer between being found and being acted on. 3 days. It had been considerably more than 3 days. The card had done what it was designed to do, and so had the city. I put it in his hand. He filed it, waved us through. Lyra clicked to the horse. The carriage moved. On the other side, the lake road. The lake, broad and silver in the morning light. Langervin behind us. I did not look back. Not because there was more worth facing ahead, because what was behind me was something I could not fix by looking at it. I had told her to leave tonight. She had said she would. The Hollow was more efficient than one conversation in a small room at night. I had told Corin the situation would resolve. Both times I had given the most honest assessment available, with the information I had. Both times, it was not enough. That was the specific weight of it. Not that I had been wrong to try, but that trying correctly and trying sufficiently were not the same thing. And the gap between them was where the people you could not save went. And somewhere in the city behind us, the man from the bar was still in that city. The one who had hesitated, who had decided he had somewhere else to be, who I had filed in the place where I put things that were not yet problems. I understood now that he had become a problem some time ago. I had simply not been looking at the right part of the picture. The lake road opened ahead of us. Lyra brought the carriage to its traveling pace, not the urgency of the gate, but not the unhurried rhythm of people with time to spare either. The pace of people who understood that distance was now the most useful thing available, and were converting the morning into it efficiently. I read the carriage as we moved. The wheel assembly, 4 spokes, slightly worn on the right axle, several seasons of this specific road. The bench beneath me, its joinery clean, the wood selected for the specific grain that resisted splitting under vibration. Someone had built this carriage with care. I noted this, filed it in the place where I put things that were simply worth appreciating. The category felt smaller this morning than it usually did. Faelwyn was beside me, not reading the scenery, reading the distance behind us, checking whether the morning had produced anything following at a pace that matched ours. It had not. From the driver's bench above, Lyra humming faintly. Something half-formed, dissolving before it became anything definite, then starting again. The absent melody of someone who had processed the worst of the morning and was on the other side of it. Not past it, on the other side of it. There is a difference. The city was gone from sight within the first hour. The road curved with the lakeshore. Langervin receded behind a headland. The lake to the left, broad and silver and patient. The terrain to the right, shifting from the maintained edges of the city's influence to the more honest character of road that existed for practical reasons rather than impressive ones. Lyra stopped the carriage at the Waystation mid-morning. The horse needed water. She climbed down, led it to the trough at the eastern wall, let it drink. I stepped out and read the Waystation. The eastern roof section had collapsed. Foundation settlement, years of it, gradual enough to be invisible until the timber gave way. I found the displaced stone at the base of the eastern corner, read it, repositioned it. The wall did not respond the way I expected. The material was wrong. Not the reed, the material. Glythstone and earthstone looked the same from the outside. They were not the same inside. I reset the stones to what the structure itself preferred, not what I had calculated, what the wall was actually telling me. The stones settled. The wall held. Not as I intended, correctly, in the way the structure understood as correct. I stood, stepped back, turned, and walked back to the carriage. Faelwyn said nothing. She had watched the process, not just the outcome. The silver eyes found me when I returned, held my gaze for a moment. Something had shifted in her assessment, not downward, something more precise than that. She turned and walked back to the carriage. An hour passed the Waystation. Lyra dropped back from the driver's bench. We had stopped briefly, at a flat section of road to rest the horse. She leaned against the carriage beside me. She did not address the Waystation. She said I took a contract in my second year of guild registration. A marsh predator, Southern Lake Road. I said nothing. I was listening. She said I spent 3 days reading it, its trails, its patterns, where it fed, where it rested, what it avoided. Everything I found pointed the same direction. I moved on it. But when I moved, the animal went into the water. She said I never knew it could swim. Every account said this type avoided deep water. 3 days of reading confirmed it. But on the day I acted, it went into the water. She said I learned 2 things. 3 days of observation builds a very good model, not a complete one. And the animal going into the water was not a failure of my skill. She looked at me once, the warm brown eyes that never performed what they did not mean. It was information, something no previous guild record had documented. Because no one else had been wrong about it in quite that way before. She said I caught it eventually. The record I filed afterward included a notation about aquatic behavior. First one in the guild's records. The mistake made me better at the thing I do, not despite being a mistake. She did not complete the sentence. She did not need to. She climbed back onto the driver's bench. I sat with what she had actually said. Not the story. What was underneath the story. The thing that went wrong was also the thing that added to what you know. It was not subtracted from you. It was added to you. I thought about the Waystation, about Glythstone and Earthstone, and the gap between mostly the same and identical. I thought about Maren, about what she had added to what I knew, at the cost she had paid for adding it. I filed this. Not in the place where I put structural conclusions. In the other place. The one that had been getting larger since White Mountain. The one that still did not have a clean name. The humming returned from the driver's bench above. Half-formed, dissolving, before it became anything definite. Then starting again. She was still managing, still moving forward. The forest was visible ahead, the canopy closing across the road, where the lake road entered old growth. Dark, dense. The atmospheric quality of a place that had been accumulating itself for long enough that the accumulated years had become a physical property of the air beneath it. I looked at it, filed what I read in the bird distribution along the eastern edge. Wrong, in a specific direction. The displacement closer than it had been when we left Langervan. I said nothing. The road continued. We followed it. Lyra stopped the carriage at the edge of the old forest. Not a decision that required discussion. The canopy closed quickly past the tree line, the light changing within the first few meters. The road surface disappearing under root systems and accumulated leaf matter. And further in, far enough that it was only barely visible from where we stood, a fallen tree across the road. Massive. The kind that did not fall on its own. There was no going through. There was only going in on foot and finding another way out. Lyra tied the horse to a substantial root at the road's edge, with the specific knot of someone who understood the difference between a horse that would stay and a horse that would decide it had somewhere better to be. She left water and feed from the cargo platform. She told the horse, briefly, practically, that we would be back. The horse's ears moved once. We went in on foot. The old growth had a specific quality. Not the quality of Sylvaean forest in the south, ancient and weighted, and aware in the way things were aware, when they had been accumulating themselves, since before any of the civilizations built above them existed. This was different. Older in the settled sense, rather than the deep sense. The kind of forest that had been here long enough to have developed opinions about disturbance, without having developed the specific gravity of something truly ancient. The trees predated the road. Readable in the way the road curved around root systems the builders had decided were not worth confronting, which told me something about the people who built this road. They had understood that some things were not worth the confrontation. The canopy changed the light, deepened it, made it more considered. The acoustic signature changed too. In open terrain, sound distributed freely. In this forest, it behaved differently. Some sounds absorbed, some amplified. The canopy and the root systems, and the centuries of accumulated leaf matter, creating a specific acoustic environment that was its own kind of information, if you could read it. I read it as we walked. The birds were present, the insects, the small movements of small creatures in the undergrowth, the normal frequency of a forest in afternoon operation, except in one direction. To the east and slightly north, away from the lake, away from the road, into the deepest part of the old growth, the normal frequency was absent. Not dramatically, not the sudden silence that preceded a specific immediate threat. Something slower than that. The gradual absence of the small things. The birds not gone, but quieter in that direction. The insects not absent, but reduced. The specific pattern of animals that had decided, separately and over time, that a particular direction was not worth visiting. I had been reading this pattern since White Mountain, since the veil deer moving, since the scaleback in the lower district, since Lyra's assessment of the guild's regional records. The displacement was closer than it had been when we left Langerven. Significantly closer. I noted this, said nothing, filed it in the place where I put things that were not yet ready to be shared. Lyra was slightly ahead. Her humming had stopped when we entered the forest. Not because of the forest itself, because the forest required a different kind of attention, and her body understood this before her mind did. Her ears were tracking, both of them, the full directional attention of someone reading an environment rather than moving through it. I had been hearing the humming since the Waystation, the half-formed, fragmentary melody of someone managing forward. Its absence now was its own kind of information. Faelwyn was to my right, hand at the hilt. A century of survival instinct that had long since become reflex. I was reading the road, the root systems crossing the surface, the specific way they distributed load from the trees above. The canopy above us moving slightly in a wind that did not reach the forest floor. The light in fractured columns, shifting. I was reading the road when the man stepped out of it. He came from the right, where the undergrowth thinned before a flat section of road. The position of someone who had been waiting, at the point where the road offered the least cover for the people using it. He had chosen well. This was not his first time doing something like this on a forest road. He was carrying a sword. He was also the fifth man from the bar, the one who had hesitated, who had decided he had somewhere else to be, and then followed us to find out where that somewhere was. He looked different in the forest, more certain, less calculating. The look of someone who had received instructions overnight and was now executing them rather than improvising. I looked at him, and I thought about the cart moving through the gate at the same unhurried municipal pace, about two guards who did not know her name. I knew his face. I had filed it in the bar, in the place where I put things that were not yet problems. He had become a problem. Not on this road. Earlier, when he left the bar and I let him go. When I filed him and moved on. When I made the calculation that he was not yet worth the attention. Maren had paid for that calculation. I stood with this for one moment. Behind him, I read the positions of 4 more people without appearing to read them. spread into the trees on both sides of the road. The specific quality of occupied stillness that was not the stillness of an empty forest. 4 positions. Bows. He said, with the flat authority of someone delivering a prepared statement, that 3 of us were going to come with him. That there were people who wanted to speak with us. That this did not need to be difficult. He said the word 3 of us, but he was looking at me. Lyra's hand was at the shoulder pouch, the moonclaw gauntlet half drawn, her ears fully forward, not ambient tracking. The fixed attention of something specific, acquired and held. Lyra looked at him. Her ears were still. Her voice was flat. "You killed Maren." Not an accusation. A question she already knew the answer to. Delivered the way she delivered facts, without performance, without weight added. The weight was already there. She did not move toward him. The 4 bows in the trees were the reason. I could read this in the specific quality of her stillness, not calm, contained. The man looked at Lyra, then at me. She talked. We found out. He smiled when he said it, the kind of smile that assumed it still had time. Faelwyn's sword was in her hand, the movement too practiced to have a visible beginning. I was reading the road, reading the 4 positions in the trees, reading the man in front of us, his weight distribution, his grip on the sword, the specific quality of his stance. He was still talking. He did not finish. Something dropped from the canopy above him, and the sentence ended there. I felt it in my chest before my ears processed it. Not sound, pressure. A resonance that arrived through the air, the way sounds with real mass arrived. Not at the eardrum first, but in the sternum, in the bones, in the frequency that living things registered, below the threshold of hearing, before they registered it above it. Then my ears caught up. 3 seconds. Deep. Resonant. Not loud. Present. The way something is present when it does not need volume, because it carries weight instead. Not a roar. Not a warning. A statement. The man on the road, who had been in the middle of the speech, he was not going to finish, looked up. Lyra said it, barely above a breath. Greymantle. 1 word. The flat, precise identification of someone who had heard this sound before, or had heard enough about it from people who had survived it, that the identification arrived without deliberation. My mind registered the direction before fear arrived. Above and ahead. Canopy level. Approximately 25 meters. The canopy gap, where 2 large trees left a corridor of sky between their upper branches. The silhouette. Large in the way that required recalibration of scale reference. Backlit against the sky. The shape of something that moved on all 4s, but was not built the way 4-legged things were built. The shoulders too high, the arms too long, the head too large and too heavy for the neck that carried it. It was testing the branch beneath it. 1 hand placed, weight applied incrementally. The branch assessed before commitment. Deliberate. Intelligent. And it was directly above the position where the man on the road was standing. I had 3 seconds. I called, "Move left, both of you, now." I did not call the landing point. I want to be honest about this. The landing point was readable. I had it. The calculation was complete before the call was made. I called the party clear. I did not call him clear. Whether the anger produced a silence where that call should have been, or whether the timing simply did not permit it, I have not been able to tell myself with certainty. We moved left. The Greymantle dropped. The impact arrived as a physical event before it arrived as sound. A shockwave through the ground, traveling through the root systems and the compacted forest floor, and into the soles of my feet, and up through my legs, with the specific quality of something very heavy meeting something very hard, at speed. The sound followed a fraction later, concussive, final, the kind of sound that silenced everything else in a radius for a full second afterward. I read the landing impact, not consciously, not as a decision. The numbers arrived the way they always arrived, complete, already done, as if the calculation happened somewhere I do not have access to, and only the result was handed up. 800 kilograms, give or take, the imprecision of reading force through organic material rather than stone. I don't know how I know these things. I just know. There are numbers that appear in the mind. I have stopped trying to understand the mechanism. I use what arrives. And what arrived told me something about the right knee, the asymmetrical load distribution from the landing. The right side had absorbed marginally less force than the left. Something in the joint had been compensating for something. Not significantly, but enough. I filed this. The Greymantle was still reorienting from the impact, 2 seconds of the frame absorbing the landing, the arms bracing, the head coming up last. The dark amber eyes found the environment. They found the man on the ground first. He was the closest moving thing, the thing that had been making noise, the thing at its feet, struggling to rise. The Greymantle did not assess this for long. The claw came down. Not a swing, a specific downward strike. The massive front claw finding him with the focused efficiency of something that did not distinguish between threats and obstacles. He did not make another sound. From the trees, the sound of bows, 4 of them. The snap of release in rapid succession. The specific sound of men acting before thinking, because their leader had just died at their feet, and their bodies had resolved the question before their minds caught up. One of them shouted something, a name, Jeb. Shouted the way you shouted a name when you already knew the person was gone. And the shouting was not information, but the specific involuntary sound of a mind encountering something it had not prepared for. 3 arrows found the Greymantle's hide. They stuck, but the stuck was wrong. The arrows had penetrated the outer layer of dense guard hair and were held there by friction. Visible, present, and utterly meaningless. They had not reached the tissue beneath. They were sitting in the fur, the way needlegrass sat in a boot. The same mechanism, the same quality of mild inconvenience. The Greymantle looked at them. It shook itself once, the massive frame shuddering, from the base of the tail to the top of the skull. 2 arrows fell. The third shifted and held. It ignored this. Then 4 men in the trees made the fastest correct decision of their lives. They ran. They left their bows. They left their positions. They left whatever plan had brought them to this forest road. and they moved in 4 different directions, with the focused speed of people who had decided that direction did not matter, as long as it was away. The forest absorbed them. The sound of running lasted approximately 15 seconds. Then the forest was quiet again. The specific quiet of a place that had just processed something significant and was now waiting to find out what came next. The Greymantle turned. It found 3 people standing in the road. The dark amber eyes moved across us. Not the way animals read threats, by instinct, by scent, by the specific frequency of fear, by the specific intentionality of something that was assessing rather than reacting, looking for the load-bearing element, the point where pressure would produce failure. It settled on Faelwyn, the most composed, the most still, the most controlled in her posture and her breathing, and the specific quality of her presence. In the patience of its assessment, in how long it held before deciding, I read experience, considerable experience. And what it settled on was the most composed, the most still, the most controlled, the threat it understood least. Faelwyn met its gaze. She did not move. I looked at the landing impact, the ground where it had come down, compressed, the root system beneath displaced fractionally by the force of something very heavy arriving from height. The distribution was not symmetrical. The left side had absorbed marginally more force than the right. The right leg had contributed fractionally less to the impact absorption. What arrived told me something about the right knee. Something in the joint had been compensating for something. Not significantly, but enough. I filed this. The Greymantle moved, not committed, fainting left, the full weight of its body beginning the motion, and then arresting at the last possible moment before genuine engagement. Testing our responses, learning the geometry before deciding. I called it faint, hold. Lyra held, the Moonclaw gauntlet fully drawn, her elbow slightly bent, the specific ready position of someone who had been in this configuration before. Faelwyn held, her sword at the angle that the next second might require. The Greymantle read our responses. It was still for 1 second, 2 seconds. Then it did something I had not anticipated. It read my call. It had seen Lyra's weight shift fractionally when I spoke, the micro-adjustment of someone receiving instruction before the instruction was complete. It had identified the source. It understood that the man in the middle was directing the other 2. It did not commit to Faelwyn. It committed to Lyra. The change of direction was fast, in a way the feint had not prepared us for. The hand came down in a sweeping strike, the kind that covered a wide arc, designed to clear a space rather than catch a specific point. Lyra moved. She drove inside the arc, got her body into the space where the sweep could not complete. Mostly. The back of the hand caught her, not the full force of the committed strike, but the scale-covered back of it, passing through the space she had almost fully vacated. The fraction that found her was sufficient. She went sideways, hit the forest floor hard, rolled, came up on one knee, functional, alert. The Moonclaw gauntlet still in her hand, but on the wrong side of the engagement, outside the geometry, needing time to reposition. The Greymantle turned toward the movement on the ground. The dark amber eyes found her. The head lowered, the massive frame beginning the weight shift that preceded commitment. I was reading, calculating, the geometry assembling itself, Lyra's position, the creature's weight distribution, Faelwyn's position, the angle I needed Lyra to approach from. The variables were too many and moving too fast. I did not have the call yet. Faelwyn moved. She put herself between the Greymantle and Lyra, not with a strike, not with a shout. She simply moved into the space between them and stopped moving. Sword out, both hands on the hilt. Her weight distributed the way it was distributed when she had decided she was not going to move from a position, regardless of what arrived at it. The Greymantle committed to her. The scale crest caught her shoulder, not the claw, the armored shoulder itself, the ridge of interlocked scale plates, passing through her guard as the creature redirected its full weight toward her position. I expected her to stagger. She did not. What happened instead? I want to describe this correctly, because I have read structures for my entire professional life, and I have never seen a person do what I watched her do in that moment. She did not brace against it. The impact arrived at her shoulder, and instead of meeting resistance, it found a path. She had already made the path. The angle of her body, the placement of her feet, her back foot pressing into the root system of the forest floor with the deliberate certainty of someone who had decided the earth beneath her was part of the technique. The force traveled through her, not into her, through her, down through the line of her body and into the ground beneath her feet, dispersing into the root system, the way load dispersed through correctly designed stone. Not resisted, redirected. The ground absorbed what her body did not need to carry. Her back foot pressed deeper into the root system rather than sliding away from it. She held. I had read structures for my entire professional life. I had never seen a human body used as a load path before. She was 100 years old. I understood in that specific moment what 100 years of practice actually meant. And in the space that her holding created, Lyra was repositioning. I had the calculation now. The geometry had simplified. The angle resolved itself into a single, clean call. Lyra, right knee, lateral, 2 degrees right. She was already moving when the call arrived. The adjustment, integrated into the motion rather than added to it, happened the way it always happened between us. The motion simply arrived at the correct angle, instead of the angle it had been heading toward. No question, no hesitation. The moonclaw found the lateral ligament of the right knee. The Greymantle's right leg buckled, the massive frame redistributing instantly, the body's own intelligence, overriding the commitment to the strike and converting it into a managed descent. Front right knuckles going down, chest following, the head dropping forward and down. The jaw came forward. The back of the neck was exposed. Faelwyn was already there. I saw the blade change a moment before she arrived. Not the small, controlled flame she had used to light a campfire on the road. Something different in scale entirely. Something I did not have a framework for. The steel going from gray to amber, to a heat that had no visible color, only the specific quality of air distorting around it. The way metal looks when it has been asked to carry something it was not made to carry and is managing it anyway. The forest around the blade seemed to pull slightly away from it, leaves curling at the edges without being touched, the moisture in the air near the heated metal evaporating before it could form. I had filed the campfire flame in the place where I put things worth knowing. I had not known what it could become. I stood in the forest and watched fire that was not performing itself, Fire that was simply present, that had arrived because it was needed, that existed at a scale I had not understood was available. Travel through a sword in a woman's hands, toward the base of a creature's skull. Something in me understood, not as a thought, as a physical fact, that I was not on Earth. Not the crack, not the scaleback, not the archive, not the bracelet on my wrist, or the 2 moons crossing the strip of sky that had been accumulating since Sylvan Forest. This specific moment. Fire traveling through a sword because someone needed it to. The world operating by rules I had not been born into and had not been given, and could not fully read, no matter how many structures I measured. I was not on Earth. I had known this. I had been knowing it since the forest, but I had not felt it, not completely. Not until this moment, in a forest on a road east of a lake city, where a silver-eyed elf drove a fire-heated blade into the base of a creature's skull, and the creature stopped being alive. Her sword entered at the base of the skull, where the fur thinned, where the bone transitioned from the reinforced architecture of the brow and jaw to the less protected region behind, where arrows had not gone. Precise, deep. The Greymantle did not make another sound. It lowered itself to the ground in stages, the knuckles first, then the chest, then the head, slowly, with the specific gravity of something very large that has decided to stop. The front claws uncurled from the forest floor, one by one. Faelwyn's sword came free. She stepped back once, and then both knees met the forest floor. Not dramatically, not with a sound. The controlled descent of someone whose body had made the decision before her mind could have argued with it, and who was not fighting the decision. Both knees on the moss and the root systems and the compacted earth of the old forest road. Her sword still in her right hand. Her head lowered slightly, not collapsed, present. The composure still there in the set of her shoulders, in the specific quality of her stillness, but both knees on the ground. This was the first time I had seen her at this register. Both knees. The magic had taken what it needed. Her body had given it, and now her body was accounting for what had been given. The forest was quiet. The birds coming back, the wind, the small movements of small things in the undergrowth that had gone still during the engagement and were now returning to their ambient frequency. I stood in the road and looked at Faelwyn on both knees on the forest floor, and understood that the fire that had traveled through her sword had not come from nowhere. It had come from her, and it had cost her, in the specific way that things taken from the body rather than from the world always cost. I understand now why she does not use it at that scale before. Standing in the forest, I simply filed it. The accounting came later. Nobody spoke. Not immediately. Lyra looked at Faelwyn on both knees on the forest floor. She put the Moonclaw gauntlet on the ground. She crossed the clearing. She did not say anything. She put her arms around her, both hands, slow. She held with the quality of someone who has something to express and has concluded that the only adequate expression is this. And without making it obvious, without performing it, she held her up slightly. Someone who had read the situation accurately, and was responding to what was actually there, rather than what was being presented. Faelwyn received it. She did not pull away. She did not adjust her position or create distance. After a moment, her arms came up, brief, then released. The movement was small. I read it as real. And at the corner of her mouth, something present, not the ghost of something, a smile, small, there, and then not there. The brevity of something that arrived without announcement and did not stay long enough to become a performance. Despite the exhaustion, perhaps because of it. I had seen Faelwyn smile before, once or twice. Always brief, always real. Before Lyra, when it was just the two of us on the road, and there was no one else whose presence she was calibrating herself against. But this one was different from the others. Not in quality, in context. She was on both knees on a forest floor, having given something significant to end something significant. And the smile arrived anyway. I watched this from where I was standing. I was simply present, with the weight of what I was looking at. I thought about the fire in the blade, about the air distorting around heated steel, about the quality of a world that operated by rules I had not been born into. I thought about both knees on the forest floor, and a smile arriving anyway. I thought about what it meant, that I was standing in a forest, on a road east of a lake city, with these two specific people, and that this specific configuration of things had produced this specific moment. I stood in front of the Greymantle. I looked at the face, the heavy brow, the jaw, the deep-set eyes, still open, still amber, still carrying the quality of having been reading something a moment ago. The quality of something that had been assessing rather than reacting, looking for the load-bearing element, trying to understand before committing. It had done what I did. It had read my call and used it. I stood in front of this understanding for a long time. Not from grief exactly, from something that did not have a clean name in any language I knew. The discomfort of having helped end something that was clearly, unmistakably, doing what I did. Reading the world. Looking for the structural logic. Trying to understand before committing. It had simply been wrong about us. Or we had been faster. I was not entirely certain. There was a difference. So I opened the journal. I wrote 2 words, looked at them for a moment. It knew. I closed the journal. Then I went to them. Lyra's field assessment was efficient and complete. No guild filing, no claim. An ambush on a forest road was survival. The guild had no claim on survival. The forest did not file reports. She moved around the Greymantle with the methodical attention of someone running an assessment she had been trained to run many times. The fingerbone sections first, both hands, each one checked individually. She took them. The eyes next, the dark amber optical tissue, the anomalous reflection property she had identified immediately. She took them. The guard hair from the upper mantle last, bundled and tied. She took them. She stood, looked at the jaw, the heavy architecture of it, a third of the skull's mass. Impressive. The kind of component a specialist buyer would find significant. She looked at it for a moment, left it. Too heavy for the value in the field. The calculation was clean. She made it, and moved on without ceremony. Faelwyn was still on both knees, not collapsed, present, watching Lyra work, with the composed patience of someone who had decided that what her body required right now was stillness, and that stillness was what she would give it. Her sword resting across her knees, the composure in the set of her shoulders, still there, unchanged. Someone who does not perform weakness any more than she performs strength. She was simply on the ground, because the magic had taken what it needed, and her body was accounting for what had been given. And she was not fighting that accounting. I looked at her for a moment. Then I moved to the body. I crouched beside him without ceremony, not from grief, not from disrespect, from the same instinct that made me read every structure I encountered, the understanding that what was in front of me was information, and information should be read completely before it was left behind. Crown marks, a folded cloth, a short blade in a sheath at his belt, well maintained, the edge sharp, the handle worn with use. A small sealed note. I opened the note. Brief, no names, a description. 3 people, specific enough that I recognized us. A route. The lake road east. And at the bottom, a mark. Not the 3 parallel lines, a variation. The same angle, the same spacing, but with a 4th line crossing the others at the base. A different level of the same organization, or a different branch. I could not tell which. I took the note. The crown marks left the cloth. Lyra looked at the short blade, picked it up, assessed it, attached it to her pack without comment. I looked at the man's left wrist, nothing visible. I stood. I thought about the bar, about the cart moving through the gate that morning, with 2 guards who did not know her name. He had been part of what produced the cart. I did not know if what happened to him on this road was justice or simply consequence. I filed this in the place where I put things that did not resolve cleanly. Lyra looked at the body. She said, "Leave him. His friends will come back for him." Not a question, not a moral position. The practical knowledge of someone who had been on enough roads to understand how people behaved after something like this. Then she crossed to Faelwyn. I looked at the Greymantle one last time. At the eyes still open, still amber, still carrying the quality of having been reading something a moment ago. It had known what it was doing, every step of it. I stood with this for one more moment, then I turned. Lyra was already at Faelwyn's side, not asking, not waiting to be asked. She had finished the harvest, and she had crossed to where Faelwyn was still on both knees, and she was simply there. Available. Someone who had assessed the situation and decided what it required. I came to the other side. Faelwyn looked at the 2 of us. She did not say, "I can manage." She did not perform the recovery she had not yet made. She simply accepted what was being offered with the quality of someone who has decided that accepting correctly is its own kind of dignity. The words came out low, almost to herself, as we brought her to her feet. The jaw was worth taking. Lyra's mouth did something that was almost a smile. She had made the correct call. Faelwyn had been watching from the ground and had noticed. Still herself, just trusting us with the parts she usually kept to herself. We helped her up. The three of us moved back toward the road, me on one side, Lyra on the other, Faelwyn in the middle, at the pace she could manage. No conversation about it. No acknowledgement beyond the physical fact of two people positioning themselves so that a third did not have to manage the forest floor alone. The forest closed behind us. The road was there, and so was the fallen tree. Massive, old. The kind that had been across that road long enough that the forest had begun growing around it. 3 people and 1 sword, and one of those 3 not yet fully back on her feet. There was no going through, not today. We turned back. The junction we had passed earlier, still there, the eastern branch picking up where this road could not continue. We took it. The horse was where Lyra had left it, the knot intact, the water and feed consumed. It looked at us when we emerged from the tree line. It looked at Lyra specifically, with the equanimity of an animal that had been told someone would be back, and had chosen to believe it. She untied it, checked it briefly. We loaded what we were carrying into the cargo platform. Faelwyn settled into the carriage. Lyra climbed to the driver's bench. I looked back at the tree line once. Then I got in. The road continued east. We followed it. Late afternoon, the carriage moving east, the lake broad and silver to the left, the road ahead. From the driver's bench above, Lyra humming, half-formed, dissolving before it became anything definite, starting again. She had closed the day. I had not yet, but I was moving toward it. I opened the journal. The question had been waiting since the anonymous room. Why am I here? I thought about what the day had cost, about Maren, and the gap between trying correctly and trying sufficiently, about the Waystation and the material I had not accounted for, about the call I did and did not make on the forest road, about Faelwyn's sword heating to beyond visible color, fire from somewhere I had not known about, traveling through steel because it was needed, about both knees on the forest floor, and a smile arriving anyway. The answer was not in any single thing. It was in the accumulation of them. I wrote it down, looked at it for a moment, closed the journal. The bracelet on my left wrist, rough cord, uneven knots, made in this world, still strong, exactly as promised. It sat differently than it used to, looser. I noticed this without examining it too closely. Faelwyn was beside me. She had been quiet since the forest. Not the quiet I had learned to read from her. The wall, the composure, maintained deliberate distance. Something different. The quiet of someone who was managing something and had decided that quiet was what the managing required. Her left shoulder against the carriage wall, her sword across her knees, the habit of someone who kept it close, even when there was nothing to keep it close for. The eastern tree line was wrong. I had been reading it since we left the forest. The bird distribution concentrated at the western edge. The displacement closer than it had been when we left Langervan. Significantly closer. Faelwyn's silver eyes had moved to the same tree line. She looked at me. I looked at her. Neither of us spoke. Lyra hummed above. The road continued. I didn't tell them what I had read in the forest. Not yet. There had already been enough things today that needed saying. The afternoon moved toward evening, the lake light changing, the surface moving from silver to something warmer. The road ahead losing its midday definition and becoming something more atmospheric. Faelwyn had been still for a long time. I noticed the change gradually. Not a sound, not a movement exactly. A weight that adjusted. The shift of someone whose body has stopped holding itself at the angle of wakefulness. The particular quality of a head that has found a resting point it did not consciously choose. When I looked, she was already asleep. Her head against my shoulder, the sword still across her knees, even in sleep, the habit present. Her breathing even, the composure gone from her face in the way that composure goes when the person wearing it is finally, completely elsewhere. She had been managing since the forest. She had stopped managing. I did not move. I looked at the road ahead, at the lake, at the two moons beginning their crossing of the evening sky. Ardent, broad, and pale. Aaliyah smaller. Pink, amber. Doing what it always did, without requiring acknowledgement. At Lyra's back on the driver's bench above, still humming, still present, still moving forward. I did not write about it. Some things were not for the journal. The road continued. We followed it.